So let's turn to this Jeffrey Epstein thing, because I've noticed I follow you on Twitter, and I like following you on Twitter. And you had a bunch of stuff when I had started, and I was talking to Patrick about this before in the break. I felt about the way, I'm just being honest, I felt the way about the Jeffrey Epstein story up until about 4 days ago, the way I felt about the Stormy Daniels story. I felt it was a tawdry, and by the way, this was wrong. And I admit that this was wrong. It was off on the periphery of my mind. It's a tawdry story. It's bad for Bill Clinton. It's kind of bad for Trump and blah, blah, blah. But I didn't look into it. Then I started actually looking into it because he's been rearrested. And I started looking into it. And you had a bunch of stuff in there. Let's bring up one of the most significant accusations, particularly with the news, that Acosta, the current labor secretary, when he was prosecuting the Epstein case, was told basically back off. Epstein is intelligence. Now, what do you know? What have you found out about the connection between Jeffrey Epstein and groups like Mossad, let's say, or the MI6, or that kind of thing? What do you know about that?
Well, I was just like you. I also thought, oh, another sordid tale, another, Weinstein or like Me Too movement sort of thing. But someone actually told me, we always hear about who Epstein whose reputation Epstein tarnished. Trump, Clinton, but we never hear about who Epstein actually is. I thought about that and I thought you're right. Like the media is always focused on like, oh, look at this guy. He hung out with Epstein. Trump specifically, they would try to use to tarnish. They used Epstein to tarnish Trump with, which has merit, I'm sure, but he's not the only one. Of course, the Clintons as well, and they try not to focus on that. But what they never really ever talk about is who is Epstein. And what I found out is that Epstein is really very close friends with Ehud Barak. He actually sent him millions of dollars from the Warner Foundation. He's also his partner, Ghislaine Maxwell. Her father was a Mossad agent, and this partner is
That's Robert
actually
Maxwell.
the woman who recruited young girls. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say that's Robert Maxwell. I want to let his name out there because people are going to be hearing a lot on this show about Robert Maxwell in the coming weeks. So they should get used to hearing the name Robert Maxwell.
Yes, Robert Maxwell was exposed as a Mossad agent, and he's her father, and she's the one that's been out recruiting these young girls. And she was actually front row at Chelsea Clinton's wedding as well. And also,
There's
she
photos
was
of that,
in
yeah.
Mar-a-Lago. Sorry, please continue.
Yeah, no, I was just saying there's photos of Ghislaine Maxwell like you say, like in the front row of Chelsea Clinton's wedding.
Well, you can always get the book.
Yes.
Robert Maxwell, Israel's Super Spy, The Life and Murder of a Media Mogul.
Yeah, there's a couple books. Here's what I know. Here's what I know. There are strong indications Maxwell was a Mossad agent or a Mossad asset or something. He was a Zionist, a politically active, big donor to Israel and so on. And as you say, Epstein, so look, that's a whole nother can of worms. But it's really important to note that these people, a lot of them connect to the 2016. Have you noticed this, Maram? A lot of them connect to this 2016 as well. That's why Maxwell, I know him because of Bill Browder. That's how I know him. And I'm like, oh, okay. It's very, very interesting the way a lot of this stuff ties into me.
Yes, we should do some kind of a map, like a informative map connecting all these people because it runs deep. And this woman, his daughter, Ghislaine Maxwell, she would go to Mar-a-Lago, and one of the victims said that she was working in Mar-a-Lago as a 16-year-old chambermaid, and she was recruited to be a child prostitute by Ghislaine at Mar-a-Lago. So, this stuff, like these guys have connected themselves into every part of the power structure of U.S. society. And I think at the end of the day, the point is to get people or future politicians to do some lurid stuff so they could have some evidence to hold over their heads and blackmail them with so that they would do things that would benefit Israel's foreign policy.
And it seems like the
So
UK, because there's a number of, by the way, there's a number of UK connections here, including, as Garland mentioned, Prince Andrew, whose name who's came up.
yes.
One of the things they have, Garland, is this black book of Jeff Epstein's. This was his book of names and addresses. And I did research that a couple of years ago, and I was like, well, this is pretty damning, of just seeing who was in this guy's Rolodex. And so I think that's the big story everybody needs to watch out for that's going to be buried is the intelligence angle on this. They're going to talk all about the lurid stuff. We'll talk more about the intelligence angle and the current media disinformation angle. Alan Dershowitz and more coming up. Next segment on Fault Lines with Nixon and Stranahan.